All right, folks, welcome back to the Cardboard Herald. My name is Luke, and today I am being joined by Keith Matejka. Keith, how are you doing, man?
Good, how are you?
That's another day. I can't complain. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
It's always good to catch up with old friends. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
I want to say the last time I saw you was Origins last year, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I'll be there again this year, so feel free to stop by.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be there. I have to reach out to some people to make sure that that's a thing that's going to happen. What week is that again? Do you remember?
I'll look it up for you real quick. Yeah, it's it's at the beginning of June's. In the beginning of June.
Yeah.
I should know this. It's the internet is not failing me yet. June 12th through 16th. So,
okay.
Yeah,
I should be good for that. There's so many conventions. It's so hard to keep track of it all. I know PAX East just happened like in my backyard over in Boston. I just don't have the time to do them all, and I'm sure you especially are very frenzied by all the scheduling and whatnot.
Yeah, I try to kind of, plan out my year at the beginning of the year, in the fall, and then I kind of I tend to just focus on the next one on the docket, right? So I think I did like 10 shows last year. Some of them are smaller, like local stuff. But the last thing I was at was Gamma in Reno, which is kind of a retailer, distributor, publisher kind of event, not really kind of consumer focused.
Okay.
And the next one is ACD Games Day, which is ACD is a board game distributor, which actually happens to be here in my hometown, Madison. So it's really easy to go to. And that's a very similar show in which you're kind of talking to retailers and distributors. But then after that, I've got Nexus in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then I've got Origins and Gen Con, and I'm planning on going to Essen this year too. So it's for the first time. So that's kind of a big deal, figuring all that stuff out. So I haven't been to Germany before, so it'll be a cool experience.
That's definitely one of the things on my bucket list, to like go particularly to Germany for a board game convention, because it's like that's the place to be for a lot of like, the heavier Euro stuff, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I mean, Essen is the biggest board game convention in the world. I mean, if Gen Con is like 60,000 attendees, Essen is 120,000 attendees.
Oof.
Like they've got like 7 convention halls. Like it's, I've never been, but from what I've heard, it's like, it's hard to imagine unless you've been there before. And it's definitely kind of a consumer focused one. So there's lots of families that go to it, and it's kind of a big deal. So I'm excited about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can't imagine trying to find like a specific booth with between 7 convention halls. Yeah, Let me just take a hike like 2 blocks down.
Yeah, it's you got to get the map out for that one, I think.
Yeah. So what releases are you looking at this year in particular? Are you looking to launch any titles at any of these conventions in particular?
So since I went full time last year, I've kind of upped my game in terms of how many titles to come out every year, from being like 1 or 2 to 3 or 4. So this year, I've got Dual Powers Revolution 1917 came out in January. 1 to 2 player, 45-minute game, getting really good reviews. And then the things coming up for Gen Con 2019, I have 2 games in the Lockup universe, in the role player universe, right? One is Lockup, a role player tale, and the other one's Cartographers, a role player tale. So these are kind of both games that are in the world of role player, which when I was originally designing role player, I didn't really think of it as a world, but over the years, it's kind of started to develop into one. So we've been doing a lot of kind of world building over the last few years. Lockup is I did not design it. From a designer named Stan Kordonsky. He's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You might know him from a game called Dice Hospital.
Okay.
He's got a handful of new games coming out. One is Rurik Dawn of Kiev, which is coming out to Gen Con or a little bit later. And that's a minute dudes on a map kind of auction selection weird. It's got some new mechanics to it, which is really interesting. And then he's got a game from Tasty Minstrel called Impresario coming out.
Okay.
And he's signed a handful of other ones. So Stan is definitely an up-and-coming name worth noting. And so Lockup is a 1 to 5 player, 90-minute game where you play as the minions from Monsters and Minions, and you're all locked up in Kolbik prison. And there's different areas of the prison that you can put your crew into, and all your crew, your kind of workers, have different values for their strengths, and you put them out in these different areas. Some of them face down, some of them face up. And it kind of works a little bit like Stone Age, where you can put as many as you want in an area, but once you've played there, you can't play there again that round. And then they resolve. All the rooms resolve, and so you're gathering resources. You're making your crew more powerful. You're trading in those resources to hire additional goons, which are you add them to your crew, and they've got victory point conditions at the end of the game, and they have immediate benefits as well. And then you can build contraband items in the cell block, and the interesting piece about it is that because some of them are face down, you're not sure exactly how much someone has decided to put into each area, and the people who have the highest strength in that area are going to get better rewards. So it has a little bit of feeling of like it's kind of a weird cross between like worker placement and like auction. Like so you're kind of putting your workers kind of feel like you're bidding sometimes. But the interesting thing about it is there's this idea of suspicion. So there's a limited pool of suspicion, and different areas have a different amount of suspicion from the guards. And the people who have the highest strength in an area, who have in an area that has suspicion, then those people are going to get that suspicion, which is not a good thing. Because when you run out of suspicion from the pool, the people with the most suspicion start losing points. So you're trying to get the best stuff, but not too. You don't want to be too good because you don't want to get too much suspicion. But you can avoid your suspicion. You've got a special unit called the Lookout, which can make you ineligible from getting that suspicion. So that's another interesting piece. So yeah, it's got a pretty wide variable setup, so every game feels different, and it's a good one. It's kind of I think it's a good entry point for people who are interested in kind of Euro games, like maybe some worker placement, and have and like maybe like Stone Age isn't really their jam. They're not really into Neanderthals and stuff, and want to hang out in a fantasy prison. Lockup's the game for you. So there's that one coming.
And then I gotta say, like, I love the idea of playing as the bad guys for a change.
Yeah,
like it's so infrequent where the game tells you, yeah, you should be the bad guys. You should be that person.
Right.
And I love the art style too. Is this the same individual who did the art for Role Player?
So his name is Lucas Ribierto, a Brazilian guy, super awesome artist. He did 99% of the art in this game. Okay. He did a lot of Role Player Monsters and Minions. So if you're familiar with that game, as I know you are, he did all the minions. He did most of the market cards. The stuff he didn't do in Monsters and Minions are like the cover and the monsters and like the character portraits on the classes. So he did about half of Monsters and Minions. He's done all of this game, except for there's like a little mini expansions, like a kind of a advanced setup cards that are in Lockup that allow kind of different starting positions at the beginning of the game, and those are called traits, and they kind of use some of the artwork from Role Player and Role Player Monsters and Minions. So some of those original cards were done by John Ariosa. So John has some art in this game as well. And then, drum roll, the next one, the other one that's coming out for Gen Con is Cartographers, a Role Player Tale. So where Lockup is a box game with a beautiful board, and that comes in at a $50 MSRP. Cartographers comes in at a $25 MSRP, so it's a much smaller game, but it is a map drawing game. So I like to affectionately call a flip and write. It seems like the standard of what these types of games are called is evolving. So it's like a roll and write game without any dice. So I call it a flip and write. Some people like to use the word flip and fill, which I don't like. So I call it something else. So basically, in this game, everyone has their own sheet of paper and they're drawing a map. So these cards get flipped each round, and it tells you what like kind of Tetris shape you're allowed to draw, like maybe between one and two different shapes you can draw, and you draw a terrain inside. So either it's a forest or a water or a village, and you're drawing these things on your map. You have 4 scoring cards that are available at the beginning of the game, which tell you how you're going to score the entire game. So that's all open information. There's 16 different scoring cards, and you're going to play with 4 at any given time. And at the end of each round, you're going to score 2 of them. So at the end, there's 4 rounds in the game, which are the 4 seasons. At the end of round 1, you're going to score spring, which is like scoring cards A and B, and that could be that's going to be 2 of the 4 scoring cards that are set aside for this game. Anyway, so you've got your goals to hit, and some of them are like get points for having trees along the outside of your board of your map, or get points for having water next to a mountain or something, because there's 5 different mountains spaces kind of pre-printed on your board. And anyway, a card flips, you're drawing, and that happens over a certain amount of time, and then you score your 2 scoring cards. You can also get coins over the course of the game, either by encircling a mountain with terrain with the shapes you've drawn, which lets you mine it, so you get a coin. So that's going to give you a point at the end of each round. And then the last bit is ambush cards. So in that deck of cards that flip that tell you what to draw, each round a ambush card is shuffled in, and when that card flips, you take your map sheet and you pass it to your neighbor, and then they get to draw like monster terrain on your map in the shape shown on the card that was flipped, and then they pass it back. So at the end of the round, each empty space next to a monster terrain is worth a negative point. So your buddies are drawing monsters on your board, and you're trying to like enclose them before the end of the round to avoid getting negative points. So you're trying to hit your goals, you're trying to get lots of coins, you're trying to minimize the damage that the monsters are doing. At the end of 4 turns, you add up your final points and see who's the best cartographer.
As you know, and for those of you who aren't aware in the audience, I have a copy sitting in front of me right now. Cool. Our review will either already be up when this recording goes up, or it'll be going up shortly. Spoiler alert, I love this game. Easily one of my favorite, quote, roll and writes.
Right.
Flip and write is definitely a good, flip and fill, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So it's funny, I'm actually doing development work right now for Deepwater Games, but I gotta say, I think this system really takes what Welcome To does and, transforms it in a very fun and unique manner, where I love it just as much as Welcome To, which it's just there's such cool mechanics about it. I love the player interaction in particular with those ambush cards. I think is really smart. And for those of you who are worried, can this game have solo play with, player interaction? Yes, it can. There are specific mechanics on the ambush cards that allows you to do that. So I've played this a ton solo as well as with other people. Awesome. And fun fact, the bugbears are the worst.
I'm trying to remember which one that was.
That's the 2 lanes with the emptiness in the middle.
Oh yeah, like the equal sign. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They are the worst, but so it's interesting. I think it's really interesting. I really like the fact that there's some interaction. A lot of these kind of games are really low in interaction, so this one kind of includes that, which I think is a nice thing. And then if you're like a if you don't like player interaction at all, there's still a good game for you there. You can always just not use the ambush cards, and it's still a fun game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea that the variance on how all of the goals score, I think is just a really smart way of doing it, that where in the first round A and B will score, but then you have to keep in mind A is going to score for the last round as well.
Right.
Whereas B, while you may be focusing on it, is only going to score for this round and the next round, and then after that, it's dead to you. It's gone. Right. It's never coming up again. And I think that really makes for some interesting choices in terms of how you play the game.
I also like the fact that I know obviously you play a fair amount of solo games. Is that you can play with as many players as you want, right? I mean, obviously when you get to high player counts, it's kind of hard to see the card, and then in the middle of the table that everybody's drawing from. But there's the only limitation of how many players you have is just how many sheets you have and how many pencils or pens you have. So This game it will come with 4 pencils, although a lot of roll and write games don't actually, which I was surprised to find out.
Yeah.
And we've talked about like getting a projector and like projecting it, the drawn card on the wall, and you could have like 50 people all in the same room drawing or whatever. So yeah, I also like because it's good for it doesn't matter how many players you have, so it's really nice. And and a lot of I also think the artwork on it, I mean, I'm a little biased, but I think the artwork on it is really good. So it's the same artist that did all of Lockup. So Lucas did both of these games. He's a busy guy, and he's been doing a lot of role player stuff for me. So yeah, that one's coming out at Gen Con. And so this is the first title that I've done that I'm not doing through Kickstarter. So
yeah,
basically, I was just going to release it at Gen Con and be like, hey, here's a sweet new game, and go through distribution. But I showed a couple pieces and people wanted to pre-order it because they wanted to kind of lock in their copy. So I eventually started taking pre-orders on my website, which are still live today and will be up till Gen Con, and then they'll just turn into regular orders. And then as an incentive, if anybody's interested in pre-ordering Cartographers, you can order it from my website at www.thunderworksgames.com, and you can either pick it up at Gen Con or you can have it mailed to you, and it comes with a 9 card mini expansion.
Let me check here.
I want to say it's 8 plus a rules card.
Yep, that's right. 8 plus the roll cards, the skills mini expansion, which I gotta say is really smart. Let's talk a little bit about it. So for those of you who aren't aware, basically how it works is the coins that Keith mentioned you get in the game. With these Bad Larrys, you can spend them on different skills that you would find in the traditional role-player games. But those skills are going to do different things for you on the map, like give you extra placements on your turn, or allow you to fill in some spaces next to enemy spots, so you lose less points at the end of the round, stuff like that. Which are really intelligently implemented. Now, if I'm looking at this right, Jordy Aiden was the one to design the game. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Jordy designed it. He's out of Brazil. He designed also a game called Rolling Ranch for Thuderworks Games.
Oh, okay.
So he's got his foot in the roll and write world. Although he just took a job at CMON, so I don't know how many more roll and writes he's going to be doing for me. But Jordy did a good job on this game, and it's interesting how small this industry is. So the guy that does most of my graphic design, he's also has a publishing company in Brazil, and he basically said, "Hey Keith, I found this cool game. I signed it for Brazil. Are you interested in getting the license for the rest of the world?" I was like, I know this guy, he's published stuff before. We have similar tastes. So I was like, well, let's take a look at it. And I was like, this game's awesome. So Jordy had taken it so far. And then I handed it off to John Brieger, who's out of California. He's done some development work for me, and he's got a couple of signed games that haven't come out yet. But he's been doing he did development on it. And so he designed all of the skills expansion. And then he also did quite a bit of work on the single player, as well as kind of just general development, like tweaking numbers and moving icons around and stuff. So, obviously I worked with John on that one, but definitely John deserves a lot of credit for the work that he did and Jordy's original design. The one thing about the skills expansion, which is cool, is like, you're getting these coins, which are points at the end of each round, and you can activate these skills once per season, so that's 4 times per game, and 3 get flopped at the beginning of the game from the deck of 8 that are available that round or that game. And they just kind of break the rules of the game somehow, and sometimes you just really need to break a rule to get that, meet those conditions on a scoring card. But you're giving up points to do that too, so it's an interesting decision point for players and adds variety. The game already has quite a bit of variety, I feel, because even though you've got these 4 different scoring cards in 4 different categories, there's like a forest one, village. So there's 4 villages, 4 forest, 4 water/farm, and 4 kind of pattern, and you pick one randomly, and then you mix those 4 up and you put them down randomly. So you kind of got two different layers of randomness to figuring out the starting setup, and now if you add the skills, you got different ones in play every game. So there's definitely a bit of replayability in the box.
Well, and also you have the two different boards to play on. The one
Right.
that's just the flat plains, and then there's the one with the wonky chasm of death in the middle of it.
Yeah, the wastelands and the wilderness sides. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely the one side is kind of more beginner, and the other one is if you want a little bit more of a challenge. There's a big hole in the middle that you can't place anything. So, yeah, it's cool. Anyway, Cartographers, $25 pre-order with the mini expansion coming out in August. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's one of the games that I'm going to be keeping on my shelf, which is a rarity these days considering how much stuff there is coming out. So I'm really excited to be playing more of this.
Cool. Yeah, so those are the two games I have coming out for Gen Con in August, and then I have the fourth game for the year is Skulk Hollow, and that was on Kickstarter last year. That's a game I designed, but I'm not publishing. Eduardo Baraf at Pencil First Games is publishing that one. Ed and I are good friends, and kind of it's an interesting story. So he asked me to work on that game. I still had my full-time job. Role Player hadn't really blown up yet. It'd done fairly well on Kickstarter and was doing fine. And Ed had came to me with this idea that his kid had, and he said, "Hey, do you want to pick up the design work on it? But you don't have to worry about the publishing part of it, which is honestly, publishing is probably 90% of the job and 10% is the design." And I was like, sweet, I can make another game and I don't have to do all this work, and I can just kind of explore cool ideas, and somebody else gets to handle all the tedious hard work stuff. And in the meantime, I got Role Player seemed to do really well, especially with the expansion, and I quit my job, and but I was still on the hook to do this one. So, but Ed and I, we get along really well, and it was fun to work with him on that. So Skulk Hollow is a 2-player only game. It was designed to be 2-player from the start. It did fairly well on Kickstarter. Did about 161,000, and it comes out in August or September. The core idea is, if you ever played the video game Shadows of the Colossus, it's inspired by that. One person plays as this giant beast. There's 4 of them in the game. They all play very, very different. They all have different powers. They all have different awesome meeples. They all have different win conditions, and they're battling a group of foxen heroes. So the foxes are on the other side of the board. They're played by the other player, and there's like there's some knights, there's some rogues, but they're little foxes and little fox meeples, and they play on a 3x3 grid that's at a 45-degree angle, like Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation, if you ever played that game, which is
I actually I have the deluxe edition on my shelf. One of my favorites.
It's a good one. I love Knizia. But anyway, it plays at a 45-degree angle like that. And the thing that I like about that 45-degree angle is that, coming out of the gate, if you're on a 3x3 grid, you're forced to move towards your opponent, right, no matter what. So anyway, you're battling on this grid. The foxes are trying to basically kill the Guardian. And how they do that is that most of them have to get in the same space as the Guardian, which is the big monster, and then they take a leap action, and they jump on him, and the foxes move to another board that represents the body of the Guardian. And there's obviously, since there's 4 Guardians, there's 4 different boards in the box, and they're all different configurations, and you basically navigate the Guardian's body, hacking away at different areas, which disables his abilities. And if you can kind of fill all the damage spaces on the Guardian, then the foxes win. And then the Guardian has their own unique ability to win, or the unique condition to win. And then they, I don't know what else. They also can against the foxes. The foxes have a royalty, a leader, and if kind of like the king in chess. Basically, if the king gets killed, then the Guardian wins as well. So the Guardian has 2 win conditions, and then the foxes have 1. And it's definitely like there's no randomness in the game, so there's no dice, but you're using multi-use cards. They have 2 different actions. I love multi-use cards, so sometimes it's I think this and just Dual Powers has multi-use cards too. I think is awesome. But anyway, it takes like 45 minutes to play. It's a good lunch hour game. It's been the artwork is great by Dustin Faust, and it's cool. It's coming out August, September.
Okay.
I think we were trying to hit Gen Con, but Ed does a really good job in his productions. I think sometimes they take a little bit longer than mine do, just because he gets really into the nitty gritty of making sure he's doing a custom insert for this one and stuff too, which is taking some time.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Like the box, you got each Guardian has their own tuck box, which has their miniature and their deck of cards. So you're just like, I want to play as Grak, which is like which is like bear one. You just pick up the tuck box and you take all your stuff out and away you go. So he's doing a lot of extra work on that. So that one I believe is going to be $49.95. It's a $50 game. You get a lot of value out of it. It's a 2-player only, which is a deal breaker for some people. But I feel like 2-player games are their own breed. It's like there's a lot of multiplayer games that say they play 2 players on the box, but it's really kind of a half-baked experience or not as balanced as well, or just doesn't do as many of the cool things as the multiplayer game does. So this one's been designed as a 2-player game from the ground up.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, and I think that 2-player games tend to be some of my favorites because they can be more tightly designed for a specific experience. When you have more players, you have more factors to stipulate for, and when you have more factors to stipulate for, then things can become more chaotic. The experience might get lost in the points or whatever goal you may have, whereas in something that's with a smaller group of people, you can more consistently convey that feeling that you're looking for, especially something as epic as like, I'm fighting these giant monsters.
yeah. So that one's exciting. I've got at least one Kickstarter coming this year for the second expansion for role player Fiends and Familiars. So yeah, I mean, people love role player. I love role player. So here's some more stuff. So the one thing people have asked for is more variety in the monsters. So there's like another set of monsters that are coming with that. So that's 6 new monsters, plus a single player version of each, which comes with its own deck of 24 adventure cards, which are all different. So the first expansion for role player came with boost dice, which were unusual, in which they go between 3 and 8 instead of 1 and 6, but they were colorless, so they helped you with your stats, but they didn't help you with your getting dice in your class color for points or helping you with your backstory. So in Fiends, you have the opposite. So you've got split dice. So split dice they're in 2 colors each.
Okay.
So there's 1 in each color combination in the box. So there's a white-red die, there's a white-green die, there's a white-black die, and the numbers, instead of going between 1 and 6, they go between 1 and 4. So you've got the benefit of having 2 colors, but the detriment of having low score values. So.
And do you get the abilities of both of those colors then when you place it?
Yeah, basically the die kind of counts as both colors anytime you need it. So if you need it for a class color, then it counts as, if a blue-red die, you're the blue class, it can count for a blue. But if you have an adventure card that's asking about red dice, it also counts as red. So.
Right. Okay. Very cool.
And then you have the familiars element of it, which is you have an additional bar, like a cardboard thing that goes at the top of your character sheet that represents your familiar. And it's got 3 new dice slots. And obviously there's a backstory style thing where you're trying to get certain colors. And then there's it's called their creature's power. You're trying to keep their power. You don't want your familiars to overpower you. So they actually have a low value for their power target. So they're going to get points if they're low enough. And then they each have their own special ability. So every time you place a die in your familiar, you've got your familiar's ability that kicks off. So everyone at the table will have a unique kind of attribute action that nobody else has. So that's going to add 3 more dice to your board to keep the play length reasonable, because with monsters at 5 players, things can get a little bit lengthy. So instead of adding 3 more turns, basically for the first 3 rounds of the game, you're rolling out twice as many dice, so 2 for each initiative card, and then you take both dice and you place them both, and you can choose which one of the attribute actions you want to take. So you get the same number of attribute actions, but for the first 3 rounds, you're going to add 3 dice to your board.
Okay.
What else is cool about it? Oh, Fiends, right? So Fiends is a thing in the game. So basically what Fiends are, they're kind of small negative cards. They're going to make your life a little bit more difficult. So they might say something like, if you get the Fiend of Corruption, he might say that weapon cards cost twice as much for you.
Interesting. Okay.
And they're placed on the initiative row on, depending on the number of players, either the highest card or the second highest and the highest card. So if you took the highest value die, you really want that 6 or that 8 or whatever, you're gonna have to take a fiend, and you take that fiend into your area, and then you can banish the fiend at any time by spending charisma token.
Okay.
Or you can spend money, so to get rid of them if you really want to.
Just pay them off, those greedy demons.
Yeah. Go back to where you came from, or talk them into it, right? So using
right.
And then what else is cool? I mean, there's a bunch of new minions in the deck, so I mean, there's the minion deck is already pretty big, but I think we're doubling it. There's lots of awesome art from Lucas on those, and some of them are interesting, in which they're kind of. Right now, how the minions work is that you start out with a combat die, and you look at the condition, and if you're meeting it, you get more, and then you roll them, and you're trying to kind of hit these different buckets for different rewards. There's some new ones that basically you roll one die, and you add your current attribute score of a certain attribute. So it's like you roll one die, and you get a 4, and you add your charisma to it, and then that's going to drop you into the buckets instead of adding more dice. So that's kind of, people have asked to actually use their stats for something. And that's kind of a response to that. I don't know what else is cool about it. Lots. I mean, there's just as many market cards in the new expansion as there were in the first expansion. I think it's around 30.
Well, and I think the question that's on everyone's mind, and you might have already covered this because there was a lot to this. Are there any new races that you can play as in this one?
So that's an interesting question. So there's 6 races in the base game.
Yep.
Plus 5 in the expansion, plus the Frogkin. All right, so we're sitting at 12, and then the 13th is the Minotaur board, which came out earlier this year.
Right.
Maybe it was last year, I don't remember. So I guess the question is, do you need more than 13 races?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
no,
I'm
agree.
legitimately asking you because, like, honestly, I haven't finalized the component list.
I mean, I don't think we need any more, but it's not a question of need. It's a question of how many more cool things can we play as kind of mentality that I think a lot of people have.
Right.
And I know when I backed the second expansion, or the first expansion, excuse me.
Yeah.
Monsters and Minions. A lot of people, myself included, got really invested in the voting on which races were going to come out next.
Right.
I was a big supporter of the Bird Boys, which, for whatever reason, I know you're a big fan of that one too.
I was a fan of that. I mean, it's interesting. So during the first Kickstarter, I was a big fan of. I did the same thing, but people, I put the Frogkin in there mainly because I wanted to. I had done that game Bullfrogs, and I wanted to kind of bring Bullfrogs into this world, and people didn't vote for it. I was like, dang it. So then I just made it anyway. It's basically where the Frogkin came from. And then for Monsters and Minions, we did the same thing. I had the 2 set up at the beginning, which was the Dark Elf and the Gnome, and then I let people vote for the other ones, and so that's where we got the Wrathborn and the Bastia and the Construct.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah, the robot race. I was not a huge fan of the idea in general, but people seem to be all about it. So I was like, okay. So we did it, and then and as I continue to work on things for Roleplayer, including the upcoming Roleplayer Adventures, the robot race it's explained how they came to this world, and they play a pretty major role in the world. So like now I think the constructs are really cool, but like initially I was like, I don't know about these guys. Yeah. So to answer your question is, will there be new races? That's just, it seems like something that's ripe for stretch goals. So like,
sure.
The amount of design work to design a new race is next to nothing. It's just like getting the artwork done and seeing if the price point on the box makes sense to include more races.
Yeah.
If people want
some
races,
pluses and minuses next to some of the stats.
Right. I mean, I've got my little spreadsheet of what they all are and where there's some holes that we could fill in.
Going by the logic of the Frogkin, this time we need to have a revolutionary leader as one of the potential individuals to play as.
Right, a Russian revolutionary. Yeah.
Naturally fitting into the role player universe.
We'll figure it out. Yeah. Yeah, so if people want new races, we'll do them for stretch goals, and people can vote on them again. And anything else you want to talk about?
Not in particular, man. I think we got a lot of stuff to chew on. Let's just go through really quick to remind the viewers what to expect in the coming months if they want to pre-order Cartographers, if they want to get a copy of Lockup, that kind of thing.
Sure, the kind of schedule rundown. Dual Powers came out recently. That's available now. Cartographers is available for pre-order on my website at www.thunderworksgames.com. I also released a new player board for Role Player, which is the Minotaur, which is also available in my web store at that website. And that will release, Cartographers will release at the same time as Lockup in August of this year, so of 2019.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming on, Keith. I really appreciate your time.
All right, man. Take care.
You too.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.